There is a lot of chatter out there about our ticking biological clock and our declining fertility as we age. So it's not uncommon for people to reach their 30s or their 40s and feel like their chances of conceiving are zero. Fortunately, that's not true. Yes, our fertility does decline gradually as we age, but it's likely that what you're thinking is not quite what the research actually says. Our chances of conceiving are not as drastically and dramatically decreased as you may have been led to believe. And I have a whole video all about that, which you can find in the description box below. But this video is not that video. This video is an interview with Deb Flashenberg, an amazing prenatal yoga teacher, childbirth educator, and doula who actually had her first child at 37 and her second child at 40. It is my hope that this video gives you a bit of hope, a story to hold on to that runs counter to a lot of the misinformation that you are likely to bump up against when it comes to conceiving in your 30s and 40s. Now, I do want to warn you, there is mention of miscarriage in this video, so if that's not something that you are prepared to hear right now, or it's not best for your mental health, take care of yourself. This video will be here when you're ready. All right, so let's dive into this amazing interview with Deb. Thank you so much for joining me today, Deb. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It's an important one, so we're going to dive right into it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm the founder and director of Prenatal Yoga Center here in New York City. We are hitting our 21st birthday, so we've been around for quite a while. Some of our early students are now drinking age. I'm also a labor support doula and a childbirth educator and a mom of two. Oh, and I have a podcast called Yoga Birth Babies.
Yes, it's an amazing podcast. I listen to it. It's top notch. Yeah. Okay. So can you tell me how you ended up in the world of prenatal yoga and birth education?
Sure. It was a very roundabout way because I didn't get into prenatal yoga having my first child. A lot of folks do. They're pregnant, they do yoga, they think, oh, this is a great avenue. I actually didn't have my first until about 10 and a half, 11 years into teaching prenatal yoga. So I started off as a musical theater performer. And along the way, somebody introduced yoga to me. I think it was a choreographer, and I really took to it. I think it's because I like moving my body. I'm a movement person, and I used it as a warm up for dancing. And then slowly I started to decide, do I want to go to ballet class or do I want to take yoga? And yoga soon won out. And then I did a yoga teacher training, and I was really not happy with the style I had chosen. So I started Bikram yoga, which is very strict. It's like a big monologue. And you can't say to the students, hey, what do you want to work on today? How are you? It doesn't work that way. So very soon after finishing that, actually during the training itself, I realized it was not the thing for me. So somebody mentioned prenatal yoga, and my mom, who did marketing, is like, that is fantastic. People are always going to take care of themselves when pregnant, and that's a place to go. So this was in my mid-ish 20s, far in my mind from having kids. So I embarked on that, and then what turned me into the whole childbirth education passion was one of my students was doing her fellowship at one of the teaching hospitals, and she asked if I wanted to see some births because none of my friends were having kids. We were performers, and pregnant in your mid-20s trying to be a performer, it didn't really go hand in hand. So she told everyone I was a med student, and she put me in scrubs, and I saw births, and I was, not to sound too dramatic, but I was a little horrified by what I witnessed in the hospital. What I realized was I was teaching prenatal yoga as modifications for pregnancy. And what I realized I needed to do was teach prenatal yoga that also included childbirth education and a strong emphasis on agency and autonomy and asking questions. And that's when I thought becoming a labor support doula and a childbirth educator would give me that background to help inform my students of their choices and what questions and conversations to have with their care provider. So that is how I ended up being very passionate about childbirth education and prenatal yoga.
Wow. I love that story because I think, and this isn't related to everything else that we'll talk about today, but I think a lot of people have an interest in pregnancy or fertility, but they don't have a lived experience with it. So they feel like they are disqualified from exploring those topics or educating other people about those topics. But clearly you were able to do so. And I'm assuming that in a lot of ways, it prepared you to some degree, as much as you can be prepared for your own journey later on.
I think the doula work is really eye-opening for me because I saw a lot of different births, and it helped me decide when it was time for me to have my own kids, what was it that I wanted for me? And much to my surprise, beginning the journey, I ended up having home births. Now, if you had asked me that, years ago, before I was in the birth world, I don't think I would have even known what that meant. So it highlighted, where did I personally feel safest and where did I feel like my team was going to best support me without feeling like I had to advocate against protocols. So it was really eye-opening.
Wow. So I'd love to actually dive into that and talk a bit about your conception and pregnancy and labor and delivery journey. So how old were you when you started trying to conceive?
All right. So I was, I think, like a week before 37. And I was freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, 35. And we got married like 2 days before we conceived. Like, it was like everyone would start to do the math. So we wanted to wait until we were married. I actually did. My husband's like, we're waiting. So I'm like, okay, we can wait. But I'm like, we're starting that right now. So I was all freaking out because I thought it would be hard. I really thought that being over 35, I just figured it was going to take a really long time. So I had these two books. I had one was Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And then there was another one, I think it's called like 3 months to Make a Baby or something like that, that you're preparing your body. And I'm looking at cleanses and eating well and taking my temperature. So I prepared, I did acupuncture, I did all the things. And then we got pregnant on our first try, which my husband's like, we need to name our child. I told you so. Because I thought it would be really hard. So we got pregnant on our first try, and I loved being pregnant. I had the nausea, all that, but it did feel like I was now in the community in a different way. So I was leading prenatal classes for years, but then I was pregnant along the students, and that felt really good. Now, the labor was much more surprising. The labor was long. It was really, really long. And at the time, I was really surprised because I thought, this is what I do. And my mom told me stories of my birth where I basically fell out. She's like, we got to the hospital, we didn't have time to prep, you just came out, you were almost born on the way there. So I really thought it would be like that. I'm like, we have a similar build. So I think in hindsight, I really see where things went a little bit awry. So I came from a dance background and a yoga background, so my body was really flexible. And now I understand that flexible bodies tend to have tighter pelvic floors. And that can cause some stalling and some dysfunction in labor. And I was also a cyclist. I would ride my bike everywhere, anytime I could. And I did a lot of spin classes. So that also contributed to the tightness. So my first labor, it was about 42 hours, and I pushed for 5 hours. Now, I know it was pretty interesting. Now, during that whole time, my team was incredibly supportive. I had a midwife, I had a doula, I had my husband there, and they were keeping track of how I was doing, how the baby was doing. And my heart rate was great. The baby's heart rate was great. My blood pressure never had a problem, but it was just taking a really, really long time. And I know that, or I believe, if I was in a hospital setting, that even though I was okay and my baby was okay, I don't think I would have been given the time that we were given. I think it would have been failure to progress because it was just very, very slow and steady. So I'm thankful that I had that opportunity to do that. But it was a very challenging birth. And again, I do have a little guilt that had I understood the physiology I understand now, I think things would have been different. But it also inspired me to learn. So I took that experience and I started to think of, well, if I'm having this experience and I know all my choices and I had a great team, what about other people's bodies? So that made me start to think about, what is the deal with the pelvic floor? What was I doing wrong? So it just inspired me to learn more about anatomy and physiology and how babies descended and rotated. Even though I knew a lot of it, this made me go even deeper into, can we overwork things? What happens when we're internally imbalanced? So it really actually changed how I taught. I mean, the whole way took like a 180. So it was now all about pelvic floor health and alignment and baby position. So it was a huge learning experience, but my second birth was very quick.
Oh, wow. How was the conception and fertility journey with the second pregnancy?
It was a little bumpier. So because at that point, I think the first time we tried conceiving, I think it was almost 39 or maybe even 39. And we did get pregnant that first time. But then it was interesting. I went back to my doctor, and the first time he did blood work right away at that like 8-week. And this time he's like, we'll wait, we'll see. And I thought that was really strange. And so then I went back at 11 and a half weeks, or was 12 weeks. I thought I was in the clear. Now I noticed my nausea had subsided a little bit. And I also noticed my breasts weren't as sore and tender as they were. So I was a little concerned. So I went into the office. I had my son, who was, I think, like maybe 18 months at the time. And my doctor did the transvaginal. Was it the transvaginal, or was it it might have been either the transvaginal or the regular ultrasound, but he didn't find a heartbeat. And so we realized that I had had a miscarriage from that at that pregnancy. And then that's when I asked him, I said, is that why you didn't do blood work at the first time? He said, yeah, the heartbeat wasn't as assuring as he wanted it to be. So, and he didn't tell me that, which is probably good because I think I would have been freaking out. So again, got pregnant right away, had a miscarriage. We waited, I think, a month, and then I got pregnant again. And then I had a chemical pregnancy, so another miscarriage. So then I reached out to an acupuncturist who I've been working with for years. And I did acupuncture. She put me on these herbs that tasted like dirt. Literally, she could have gone into Central Park with like a baggie and put the dirt in with some water, and I'd be like, no, it's the same thing. Like it was awful. But I did it. Like I really stuck to it. It was awful. But then I got pregnant with my daughter. So that was 39, and I had her at 40. So I was a geriatric pregnancy for both. It's not the worst term. That is the worst term. We need to change that. It's the worst. So it's interesting. And my family history is actually having babies older. My mom had them in her 30s, but my grandmother, my mom's mother, had her at 40. And she thought she was going through early menopause and found out that she was pregnant. So it didn't really surprise me that I was able to conceive at 40, but I was incredibly thankful because I was pretty concerned that we might have problems, based on my age. But what was beautiful is my midwife never treated me like I was a problem or old. Like, she didn't say, oh, you're 40, we're going to have to induce you early. Like, she really looked at my whole person and my health, like how my blood pressure was. I didn't have gestational diabetes, my weight. Like, she looked at the whole person and treated me as if I was anyone else. And that was important to me.
That's lovely. And it unfortunately isn't as common as I think it should be or could be. So I'm really happy that you had that experience. I'm wondering where the fear or concern around your age and fertility came from, since you had these experiences in your life or in your family history that were actually the opposite of maybe what we tend to hear. So where did the fears come from?
I think I just kept hearing everybody say, once you're 35, your eggs aren't quite as strong. Like it's a message that I'm constantly hearing. It's funny because now, well into my 40s, I'm seeing students that are 35, like just turning 35, and they're like, oh, I'm an older pregnancy, I'm high risk. My care provider wants to induce me at 39 weeks. And so I think it's just so part of our culture to believe that you have this ticking time bomb at 35, the day you turn 35 on the calendar, like your eggs are just faulty. So I think I just believed that, which is not typically like me, just to believe common Western. I mean, I have the utmost respect for Western medicine, but I do think we're a little fear mongers in that. So I'm a little surprised that I fed into that.
Yeah. I think there's actually a lot of benefits to having children later in life. And I'd love to hear any pros that you've found.
Well, I don't think my business would be what it is because I had a lot of time to dedicate to that. That was truly my first baby. So I could really put all my focus into that. Now, 2 kids later, I am juggling everything in the school hours. Once they go off to school and then once I have to pick them up, it is those hours that my schedule is bonkers. And before, I had a lot more spaciousness. I could, work in the morning, take a break, come back, work in the evening. Now I'm helping kids get to sleep and I'm making dinner and I'm making, I'm packing lunch boxes. So for me, it was really helpful to have that time to dedicate to my career, which I deeply enjoy. And I also love traveling. I don't do it nearly as much as I used to. So I appreciated having that time to travel. But I also think there's a certain maturity, at least in my experience. And I have a couple of friends that did have kids in their earlier age, and they often said, like, I felt like I was missing out on some of the things they saw me doing. Now, on the flip side, their kids are heading off to college. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so envious that you're about to live this, your third act. So I think there's, benefits depending on who you are and what you want. But for me, it gave me less of that fear of missing out because I was able to do a lot. And it helped me check things off my mental list of feeling confident, and I don't know if worldly is the best word, but I saw a lot and I learned more about who I was because I was able to put the time into that. And I learned to prioritize. It doesn't mean that I couldn't have, things just would have been different. But where I sit now, I enjoyed the timeline of having kids later.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I often think about the benefits of having the chance to mature a bit emotionally, because I know 20-something-year-old Kendra was in a very different place than 30-something-year-old Kendra. And I think I have developed a lot more patience and empathy, which seem like important things to have when you're raising children.
Yeah, and even impulse, like the impulse, like, oh, I got to do that. I got to do that. I think I definitely matured for that. In general, I just think I'm a more grounded, more matured person. Like I talked to my mom who had kids, in her early 30s, and she said because there was many years that she still wanted to do stuff, but she was a mother. She said, I felt this, and she even agreed that her wishes and hopes and unfulfilled dreams somewhat fell on myself and my brother. So I felt like I had a chance to kind of do what I needed to fulfill that so that I'm not living through my kids. Now, this is just my experience. I don't want anyone listening to this saying, well, I had my kids in my 20s, it was great. I totally support that. This is just from my own lens of having kids a little older than how it served me.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing all about your own experience. And so I know that people are definitely going to want to learn even more from you and learn more about you. So can you tell us where we can do that? Where can we find out more about Deb?
Sure. Prenatal Yoga Center. Everything is on Prenatal Yoga Center, and my podcast is called Yoga Birth Babies. So you go to my website. We have online classes, in-person classes, on-demand workshops, in-person workshops, teacher trainings for those that want to do prenatal and postnatal teacher training, and my podcast, Yoga Birth Babies.
Awesome. I will definitely make sure to include links to all of that in the description box below. Thank you again.
Thanks so much.